Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. R. Kelly's secret illegal marriage to Aaliyah takes center stage at his sex crimes trial. The singer's former manager, Demetrius Smith, saying he bribed an official for a fake ID when Aaliyah was just 15 years old. And a major arrest for the murder of a University of Miami football player.
Brian Pata, his whole world revolved around football and his family. So it's not like he had a lot of enemies.
Investigators now saying Brian Pata's former teammate shot and killed him 15 years ago. Plus, Weinstein indicted again in Los Angeles. One of the sex crime charges thrown out by a judge is back on the table. His former attorney reacting.
I look at it as a little bit of a pile-on, and you have to wonder if that's going to backfire.
And later, Robert Durst's second week on the stand. What he had to say about his murdered best friend's ability to keep a secret. Did she know the truth about his wife Kathy's disappearance all along?
If I wanted to commit a crime, I would have had to have committed a crime.
Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. R. Kelly's trial is heating up as a second woman is testifying against him, accusing the R&B singer of assault. And his former manager says R. Kelly believed Aaliyah was pregnant with his baby when she was 15 years old. Demetrius Smith said it shouldn't have happened, it was wrong. He's R. Kelly's former tour manager who was forced to testify but was given immunity. Prosecutors alleged that R. Kelly bribed an Illinois government official $500 for a fake welfare ID so that R. Kelly could marry Aaliyah in 1994. He told the jury how he helped R. Kelly get the fake ID while Aaliyah was just 15 years old and thought she was pregnant with Kelly's child. A reluctant and sometimes combative Smith told the jury how R. Kelly and he rushed from Orlando to Chicago for a hotel room wedding near the airport. Also to the stand was Jane Doe number 5, a young woman who says she met R. Kelly when she was just 17 years old. Jane Doe number 5 says R. Kelly pressured her into oral sex when they first met. She admits she told Kelly she was 18. Months later, she says she was having such severe abdominal pain, R. Kelly agreed to schedule a doctor's appointment for her. Then she learned she had herpes. According to the woman, she had to live under R. Kelly's rules in his presence, saying he wanted her to call him daddy and recorded when they had sex. He's accused of transporting her across state lines, racketeering, and forced labor. Joining us today is criminal defense attorney Julie Rendelman and Terry Austin. Julie, bribery is one of the charges R. Kelly is facing, but does Demetrius Smith admitting to offering to bribe someone and following through with it maybe make him guilty and not R. Kelly?
So the answer is yes and no. So we know that he's guilty. He admitted it on the stand, but the one thing he got that R. Kelly did not get is immunity. And so the real question is whether or not R. Kelly participated in any way with the plan to have this individual bribe. We know from some of the witness, from this witness, that they believe he was in the room when the discussions were had about the bribery, but he didn't make a comment. Now, with that said, he didn't tell them not to bribe the witness. He told them basically that he wanted certain things to be done, and it's unclear whether or not he actually participated. So yes, Demetrius is the person that did the actual acts, but the question is whether or not they did it acting in concert.
Absolutely. Now, Terry, R. Kelly made an album with a 15-year-old called Age Ain't Nothing But a Number, and even his manager suspected something was going on with him and Aaliyah. Does this fit the prosecution's narrative?
You know, Brian, this fits the prosecution's narrative perfectly. We know that when artists make songs, oftentimes the lyrics mimic their actual life. And here the lyrics said, ain't nothing but a number, and throwing down ain't nothing but a thing. So age ain't a number and throwing down ain't nothing but a thing, to me implies that he is having sex with younger women. And of course, that doesn't mean that that's evidence or that it'll be necessarily proving anything to a jury later down the line, but it does look bad. And so I think that the prosecution perfectly picked this narrative.
Absolutely. Now, Julie, Jane Doe 5 reiterated some of the same rules Geronda Pace had to follow, but also the same initial lie about her age. The defense is making a big deal about these lies. Does that really matter here, though?
Well, it does in terms of the idea of her credibility. It certainly doesn't. It's strict liability, and it is strict liability when it comes to children being the victims of sexual acts. However, it does make a difference because if this is someone that was willing to lie at the time, the argument that the defense is going to say is, well, she's willing to lie on the stand. Now, I'm not sure why it matters whether or not she was 17, 18, or 19. At the end of the day, if he gave her herpes, it sure doesn't matter what age she was. So at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to really make that much of a difference. But yes, this is just about the credibility of this witness.
All right, and we'll see how that jury finds him credible or not. Of course, the R. Kelly trial will continue, and we'll continue to follow it. Turning now to more top legal news, a development with one of the Doomsday defendants. Chad Daybell is now waiving his right to a speedy trial. Lori Vallow Daybell, along with her husband, Chad Daybell, are charged with the murder of Lori's two children, J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan. Lori's case is on hold for now while she's deemed incompetent to stand trial. But as for Chad Daybell, prosecutors say the plan is to seek the death penalty if he's convicted. He's scheduled to stand trial in November. Now he's waiving his right to a speedy trial. This means that the November date is likely to be pushed back. Chad's due back in court next month. Convicted wife killer Scott Peterson is expected to appear in court on Wednesday. His attorneys say he deserves a new trial due to potential jury misconduct. A judge is likely to set a date for a hearing on the matter. The juror in question, Rochelle Neese, could be called to testify. The defense says Neese did not disclose that she was a victim of a crime, and that could have impacted deliberations. Peterson was sentenced to death for the murders of his wife Lacey and their unborn son. His death sentence was thrown out. Now, a judge will rule at a later date if he should get a new trial too. And in Florida, a dramatic high-speed chase across county lines ended on Interstate 95. The Martin County Sheriff's Office says that vehicle had a body in it. Deputies say someone called 911 on Friday night to report a shooting. The caller said they watched a 17-year-old kill someone and then load the body into a pickup truck and drive away. Helicopter video captures the moments law enforcement caught up to their suspects driving more than 100 miles per hour. Deputies used a pit maneuver to force the driver to stop. 2 people are now in custody. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, Harvey Weinstein is back in court. The latest saga in the former movie producer's lengthy courtroom drama. But first, the arrest 15 years in the making. Why police are now pointing the finger at a former teammate of a murdered star college football player. How the Miami community is reacting next.
Hi, this is Dan Abrams with exciting news for all of our Law and Crime followers on YouTube. You can now get the live Law and Crime Network with YouTubeTV for all of your daily live trial coverage, legal news, expert analysis, and original true crime programs. Subscribe to YouTubeTV today and then locate Law and Crime in the channel guide. And for only $1.99 a month, you can add the network to your bundle. Watch Law and Crime every day with YouTubeTV. We put you in the jury box.
Welcome back. 15 years after a University of Miami football player was murdered, police make an arrest. Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy is here with more on the murder of Brian Patta.
Brian, people in Miami, Florida have watched this case for the last 15 years. And now finally, Brian Patta's family is closer to getting some answers.
Mind you, this rocked the community. It totally rocked South Florida's community at the time. And it rocked college football at the time, too, because everybody knew who Brian Patta was.
Former Miami news anchor Tony Segreto covered Brian Patta's murder. In November 2006, the 22-year-old University of Miami football player was months away from the NFL draft when he was shot to death, execution style, at his apartment complex.
There was no suspect, yet there were a lot of suspects. There were, there was an incident in a nightclub, if I recall, where, someone said, "I'm going to get you one day," and there was a very tumultuous relationship with his girlfriend.
All right, Mr. Jones, stand up and face the wall for me.
Last week, sheriff's body camera video captured the moment Patta's former teammate, 35-year-old Rashawn Jones, was arrested for his murder.
For us, we always say it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And for us, it's about getting it right
The Miami-Dade state attorney says an eyewitness picked Rashawn Jones out of a lineup and that cell phone records put Jones within 2 miles of Pata's apartment complex around the time of the murder. The state attorney says Jones told investigators twice that he was at home that night and that a number of interviews revealed Jones and Pata had ongoing issues, including a threat by Jones to shoot Pata in the head. Pata's family will finally get some answers.
It's been 15 years of waiting, 15 years of missing Brian, 15 years of waiting for results, of being told constantly to be patient, to have faith in the system, to have faith in the process, and you had faith in us.
Rashawn Jones right now is in jail in Marion County, Florida. That is northwest of Orlando. He has not yet been transferred to Miami-Dade to answer to these charges. Brian?
Thanks, Anjanette. Let's bring back criminal defense attorney Julie Rendelman and Terry Austin. Terry, what do you think is the strongest piece of evidence that makes police think Jones murdered Pata?
You know, there's no question that the strongest piece of evidence, in my opinion, is the digital evidence. The fact that his first story was, I was at home when this all occurred. But the police traced his phone 2 miles away, and his home is much further than that. So that's what got the authorities thinking. They did multiple interviews, and then from those interviews, they found out that Jones and the victim had a very tumultuous relationship. They had a physical altercation even at one point. And I think the most damning piece of evidence, other than the fact that there's this digital trace, is that he threatened to kill Pata. So at one point, there was a threat to shoot him in the head. So all of this together, I think, added up to arresting him. And I think that digital evidence was the most important piece of information.
Absolutely. Julie, with a suspect so close to the victim, why do you think it took 15 years for an arrest?
You know, it's funny. There's a show called 48 Hours, or The 48, and it's about the fact that homicides usually need to be solved within 48 hours, and when they're not, they seem to lose speed and they grow cold very quickly. The one thing about homicides is there's no statute of limitations, and the one thing that happens is witnesses tend to not want to come forward, and it takes time to get witnesses, especially on a shooting case like this, to come forward and say what they know. And sometimes, the passage of time allows them to feel safe enough and comfortable enough to come forward. We don't know now the full details. We'll hear eventually what the evidence is specifically, but that may be one of the reasons. And then making sure that they've covered all their bases to guarantee a conviction, even if it takes, as it did, 15 years.
I can see that. And Jeanette, was there anything else that pointed to tensions between Pata and Jones?
Well, the state attorney said in a press release that Pata was bigger than Jones and that there had been some type of physical altercation between the two and that Pata had actually beaten Jones up. And Tony Segredo told me that Jones actually was having a relationship with Pata's girlfriend around the time that this happened. So there was definitely some underlying tension between these two players who were on the same team.
Yeah, definitely probably expect the defense attorney to bring that up if this does get to the point of a trial, that maybe they throw out self-defense, maybe they throw heat of passion. We don't know, but of course we'll continue to follow this case in Florida v. Rashawn Jones. Thank you all. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, alleged lies and affair for Robert Durst. The latest on his heated cross-examination. Plus, on, then off, and now on again. Harvey Weinstein is back facing another charge for an alleged sex crime. What this means for his defense after the break. We're back. Harvey Weinstein is again facing charges in California. Prosecutors in Los Angeles have obtained a new indictment for the former movie mogul after one of his charges was thrown out. A grand jury has reinstated one count of sexual battery by restraint against a woman for Harvey Weinstein. The allegation dates back to May 2010. The judge previously threw it out, saying the charge did not properly meet the statute of limitations guidelines. So, prosecutors went back to the grand jury and obtained a new indictment for the allegation. Weinstein is pleading not guilty to all charges.
I think that there's really a strategy question that they should be asking themselves. Whether or not they are staunch believers in the allegation, at some point, I think you have to ask yourself does this action make me look as if I'm piling on? And, I think most people look at Harvey and, I of course have lots of knowledge and have spent a lot of time with Harvey. And I just look at it and I think he is broken. He is clearly diminished in terms of health and stature. And is it really going to be beneficial to add one more count when in the end, is it really going to make a difference?
Back to discuss is criminal defense attorney Julie Rendelman and co-host Terry Austin. Terry, how is this charge getting dismissed and reinstated and back and forth like this? Can you explain?
When you have an indictment, it has to have very specific allegations. And this specific allegation occurred, it was sexual battery back in March 2010 or May of 2010. And the charge was initially filed timely, and it was within the statute of limitations. But since then, the statute has expired. And in July, the judge dismissed it, but gave the attorneys the ability to replead and refile. And they did that. And they did it this time, and it was very specific. And it used the words continuously charged. So because they repled with that specificity, the charge has now been accepted.
Yeah, it's been added now, definitely something that I think the defense will have to tackle. And let's speak about that, Julie. Now that Weinstein is indicted on this additional charge, what do you think the next move is for the defense?
So they've showed what their next move, which is basically to take some time. They want to review the charge. They want to see if they got it right this time, meaning did the prosecution get it right? Because they got it right, got it wrong quite a few times already. And so, the defense has been very effective in making them go back in again and again. And I think that they're going to potentially try it again. If they're not successful, then this is going to be potentially grounds for appeal if he is convicted of this specific crime or of any of those crimes. But obviously, time will tell.
All right, so review the grand jury minutes, potential appellate issues down the road. Seems like a lot that the defense can work with here as they progress in this case in California. Julie, just quickly, do you think there's an appellate issue here? Do you think there's a good chance, or is it just one of many you got to try?
I was listening to what Donna said, and Donna said, there's a point where you have to stop. But there's a victim here, and the victim is kind of, an important aspect of making sure that justice is served. And quite frankly, Terry is right. April was the statute of limitations date, and they filed it in time. The issue is what happened afterwards. So I think at the end, they're going to be successful, meaning the prosecution is going to be successful. As to whether they win at trial is a whole other issue.
All right, we'll see how this plays out as it continues. Of course, we'll give you gavel-to-gavel coverage here. When we come back, day 8 on the stand for the real estate heir accused of murder. What Robert Durst has to say about his affair with Prudence Farrow and the best friend he's accused of murdering next. Welcome back. We head to California, where Robert Durst is on day 4 of cross-examination, facing more tough questions about his alleged affair with a woman who inspired one of the Beatles' hit songs. The real estate heir is on trial for the murder of his best friend, Susan Berman, who was shot execution-style in her home near Los Angeles. Prosecutors say Durst killed Berman because she knew exclusive information about his wife's Kathy disappearance, another murder that Durst is accused of. Durst is under intense cross-examination where prosecutor John Lewin asked him about his affair with Prudence Farrow. The defendant allegedly made a phone call to Farrow days before his wife vanished.
Isn't it true you made a call from a payphone to Prudence Farrow a few days before Kathy disappeared?
I don't recall the telephone call that Prudence said I made.
Would you agree that during your conversation with Prudence that she made clear to you that she was going to, quote, cut you off because she did not want to date you while you were married or not separated from Kathy?
Prudence Farrow never said anything to me about not wanting to see me as long as I was married to Kathy. In her interview, Prudence Farrow changed her mind repeatedly about what our relationship was.
The state continued to press Durst about his best friend and her ability to tell stories, alleging that if Susan had information about his wife, it might slip into the wrong hands.
Could Susan have a big mouth?
Susan had a big mouth. Your terminology is big mouth, not mine.
Okay, what would your terminology be?
She told stories.
Would you agree that Susan Berman, as your best friend, even though she was someone you cared about, and even though she was somebody that was very loyal, that if you had told her a secret, such as confessing to murder, that you would have been very concerned about her ability to keep that quiet?
Anything I said to Susan would be something that Susan might talk about.
Julie, do you think Lewin has caught Durst in that big gotcha moment yet? Or do you think this cross is about the little inconsistencies?
It's a fair question. I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, anytime you get a defendant on the stand to refuse to answer a question that's being asked of you, that's a gotcha moment. Now, one would argue that the reason he's not answering questions at this point is because he's had enough. He's been up there for, I mean, most of my adult life. So it's, you know, in terms of that, that could be the reason. But yes, I think there's gotcha moments. And then there's so many inconsistencies between the Jinx movie, the interviews, and he's gotten caught in many lies. Whether they add up to him murdering Susan Berman beyond a reasonable doubt, obviously that's for the jury to decide.
Now, Tara, I'm curious, so at the end of this testimony, do you think that Durst believed Berman's loose lips could sink his ship, or was she a trusted confidant of Durst?
Listen, I think it was a little bit of both. There's no question that he loved Susan Berman. He even said that Susan was closer to him than his family. But at the same time, Brian, he did not trust her for a minute. And I think he started hearing that she was talking about what he confided in her, and he was afraid that she was going to go to the authorities. And so he protected himself and did what he had to do, which is what he does all of the time. Julie's talking about these inconsistencies. That's exactly what he does. He says what he needs to say when he needs to say it.
All right, we'll see how this continues. Of course, Law and Crime's covering the case. Thank you for joining us here at Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.